In this problem, we want to graph this equation, 5x plus 10y equals 20, but specifically using the x and y intercepts to graph. So far we have graphed using the y-intercept and the slope to do rise over run. We have also graphed using the xy chart, but this time we specifically want to use the x and y intercepts to graph this line. Okay, so we've previously talked about the y-intercept, and in some ways I think it might be easier to actually start with the y-intercept for this one, because remember that the y-intercept is always in the format 0, comma, b. Okay, and we don't have to know what b is at this point. That's actually what we're going to find. But what we do know is that any y-intercept has an x value of 0. So we can use that information to solve for, to plug in and solve for y in this problem. Now, I do want to say that obviously looking at this equation, this is in standard form. But when we are just trying to find the x and y intercepts, it's okay to keep it in standard form and not solve for y. Whereas in other methods, we typically want to solve for y and get it in that y equals mx plus b format. But with this one, we're good to keep it as is, and you're going to see why here in just a second. So again, the y-intercept is when x equals 0. So let's go ahead and plug this in, x equals 0, into 5x plus 10y equals 20. So 5, and our x again is 0 in this problem, plus 10y equals 20. One thing I love about finding the x and y intercepts is because when you plug in 0, things start, going away, because 5 times 0 in this case is 0. So we don't really need that. And that just leaves us with 10y equals 20. And then if we solve for y here, we divide by 10. And that gives us y equals 2. So we know our y-intercepts is the x value of 0 and our y value of 2. All right? So that gives us 1 point that we can plot on the graph. Let's go ahead and now go back to the x-intercept. So this is kind of the opposite of the y-intercept. So if the y-intercept is when x is 0, the x-intercept is when y is 0. So now we're going to plug in 0 for y. So you're plugging in 0 for the opposite variable, the other variable, okay? So if you're trying to find x, you're plugging 0 in for y. That gives us 5x plus 10 times 0 equals 20. And 10 times 0, of course, is just 0. So that goes away and leaves us with 5x equals 20. Now we're going to divide by 5. And that gives us an x value of 4. And again, just be real careful when you're writing this down that you put it in the correct order. So our x value is 4. That's going to go first. And then our y value of 0. Let's plot these 2 points. We're being really careful with our zeros in our points. So our x-intercept starts at the origin, and then we're going to go right 4 units, and then not up or down. And notice, again, this is an x-intercept because it crosses the x-axis. So we are on the x-axis, confirming that this is the x-intercept. The y-intercept is 0, 2. So we're starting at the origin, and we're going up 2. And we graph by connecting, and that gives us this line. Okay, so let me say one other thing here. Can you use any method? Does it matter what graphing method you use? And what I mean by that is you have now learned, again, slope-intercept to graph. You have learned using an XY chart, and you have now learned using X and Y intercepts. And the answer generally is no. But there's a caveat here, and that is when you are using the X and Y intercepts, it may not always work out pretty. And what do I mean by pretty? That means it may not always work out to be whole numbers. Depending on how the numbers work out, you may end up getting a fraction. And can you graph a fraction on paper? Well, you can estimate. But can you graph a fraction in the computer? Not so much, okay? And so if you end up doing this method, which I really love, I mean, it works out, it's really simple to do. But if you end up doing it and you get a fraction, then my suggestion would be go and use one of those other methods. Okay, so you want to use the intercept and then the slope, or pick some values in an XY chart that would give you whole numbers that you can graph. Okay, so does it matter what graphing method you use? No, but the X and Y intercepts may not always work. And by work, I mean graphable in a computer. Okay, and so that's implied there. You may not be able to always graph it in the computer, but it will always, those will always work to graph lines in life. Let me put it that way. Okay, so in life, obviously, we don't have nice whole numbers. We wish we could, but it just doesn't always work out that way. So you pick whatever method you like. I've shown you 3. You've now got 3 tools in your toolbox. You find the tool that works best for you.